just run through a few bits. So we're delighted to be here, and a massive thank you to the sponsors and partners of Birmingham Tech Week. We couldn't do it without you, and thank you very much. So my session today, a few housekeeping and parish notices before we get started. If you do have any questions during the session, there is going to be a Q&A at the end, so please use the buttons in Zoom to ask your question and we'll pick those up. Any questions that we don't get around to answering sort of live, we'll follow up with you afterwards. And if you do need to leave the session at any point, that's fine as well. We will be sending out a recording for those that couldn't make it in person or have to leave halfway through. So without further ado, let's crack on. So I'm Carl Nicholson, and I am the CIO of Synaptek. We're a Birmingham-based technology business. Our office is over on Bull Street, and we essentially link people, processes, and technology, which is the topic of our session today. A little bit about me. I'm a techie, or used to be. I was an operations guy, and I used to work, as you can see, in motorsport. My job was to look after systems and data centers that we literally ship around the world to racetracks. These pictures are in chronological order, starting at the very bottom. And the reason I put them up is because it's always really interesting to kind of look back on my career, in the sense that on the World Touring Car Championships, everything we did was on premise, if you like. So we had to literally ship computers from A to B, and actually all the way up to the present day at Synaptek, we don't own a single physical server anymore. And it's quite an interesting journey, really, to see how technology's changed across sort of that 10-year period. But anyway, enough about me and more about people, processes, and tech. So I'd like to start today with a bit of an example. This is a fictitious company. We're going to say it's several hundred employees, and it has distinct business units, which may look similar to a lot of you. So we've got marketing, sales, we've got support, operations, finance, and ERP. And what we tend to find, companies that are maybe starting up today or have been through this digital transformation thing that we all talk about, there tends to be a dominant platform within each of these domains. Again, these are fictitious. I've made these up. They're just an example. Point to note, these are all SaaS-based applications, and what that really means is they're a website. You pay them money and you consume their service. That's not to say that you couldn't have these hosted on premise or within your own data centers, perhaps some older software. But we've just used these to bring us bang up to date, really. So anyway, we've got these platforms here, and they do what they do within these particular lines of business. But what we tend to find is none of these platforms do absolutely everything we need them to do. So for instance, Marketo isn't great at product analytics. It's not brilliant with customer surveys, and it also doesn't manage events for us. And we tend to find that across all of these platforms, you either have to buy additional modules to do this stuff, or diversify into other things to achieve all the things that your business needs to actually get done. So in this particular example, we've been and bought all these platforms. Our digital transformation is complete, as it were, but we're only hitting really 70% of the things we need to do as a business. So what tends to happen, and in this example, we've picked on the sales team. The sales team have been really enterprising, and they've gone out and they've found some more things to cover off these gaps. And it looks like this. And that's great, and that works, everyone's happy. But what tends to happen then is the same happens across all of our business units. So we start to go and procure more platforms, more stuff to get work done effectively. And again, this is okay. But what tends to happen is things go a bit crazy. We've seen this many times, and in many ways, it's happened at Synaptek as well. And this isn't great. This is 41 web platforms or applications to run our business. So our first poll today is, do you recognize this in your workplace? Is this something you have seen? You should have some voting buttons on screen now, so we'll give you a few seconds to tell us what you think. I'm going to drink some water. Few more seconds, there we go. Any more votes? Okay, cool. I'll pause at that and just share the results with you. So what we've seen here, just as a quick straw poll across the audience, we're saying 70% of you have seen this before, 2 of you say no, which is 8%, and 5 of you aren't sure. But we'll talk about why this is a problem, how this happens, and also how we can look to address it as the presentation goes on. So let's close that. So why is this a problem? Well, it's a problem because it's 41 platforms to have to look after effectively. It's a nightmare for our IT teams because people like me, with my credit card in my hand, can purchase an entire platform in about 5 seconds flat without getting IT approval, or in fact, in certain cases, without even telling IT whatsoever. I know I've done that before, and I'm sure some of you probably have as well. So to ram the point home, it's 41 different sets of reporting, 41 potential compliance nightmares, because let's assume that I've even, told the business I've gone and done this. We've still got to access control that. We've still got to make sure it adheres to all of our ISO practices, etc., etc., etc. None of this stuff actually talks to each other. So there may be some integrations out the box that we can turn on, perhaps Salesforce into Slack or similar, but typically none of this stuff natively just works together. There's a huge potential for data overlap. No one's really got a handle on where our data actually is. And there is always that sort of case that, if you ask a company where its money is, I would argue your money is your data. Without that, your company is nothing. It's not just the stuff in the bank anymore. So our data is really precious to us as organizations. Obviously, there's platform sprawl. We talked about shadow IT. We talked about the fact that we can just do this stuff without telling anybody. But the one I'm most passionate about isn't actually the shadow IT piece. It's actually a terrible user experience. And I'm sure you've had this yourselves where you've literally spent some time during a day just copying and pasting stuff from that platform into that platform. And that's not great because that's time wasted that you could be doing your job, doing some more interesting stuff. So why does all this matter? And it matters because this is the reason Synaptek exists. It is to link people, processes, and technology. The way we see this at Synaptek is using this stuff as your kind of digital landscape to get stuff done. And it's only ever as good as that integration between system A and system B, and also the workflow and the business rules between those 2 platforms to actually get whatever it is done. And I'll explain a little bit more about that as we progress through the presentation. So looking at this another way, going back to our example of our 40-odd platforms, this is how Synaptek views the world. We remove those business units because ultimately that's irrelevant to us. They're no longer silos at this point. They're not just a sales platform. They're not just a marketing platform. And we treat these as tools to do stuff. And obviously the use cases are different between every business, and we'll come on to what hyperautomation is and what it really means later. But we use these as stepping stones. So one of the things we do a lot is work with CIOs to kind of evangelize that use these platforms together, work between them, stop treating them as just that sales platform or just that marketing platform, and start thinking, well, how can I take customer journeys or whatever as a business process from marketing into sales, into procurement, into billing, and how can we get that all nicely joined up so that we don't waste any time? So a nice quote here, I'm sure you're all sick to death of hearing about COVID-19, I know I am. But I think this is a great quote. A lot of organizations are viewing this as a shock to the system that has accelerated everything that they've been doing. I'm sure there are some of you out there thinking, oh, this is the type of stuff we wanted to do for years, but never quite got around to it. And the growth that we're seeing within IT especially, and business process in general, I think it's fair to say COVID-19 has accelerated some companies' plans and really brought this into sharp focus. You can imagine that example I gave earlier of, well, I'm just going to go and buy some random SaaS and do some stuff. Was really hard to manage and get a handle of when we were all sat in an office together. I think you'll agree it's even more difficult now we're all sat in our own homes, etc., etc. I think getting things joined up and getting those business processes as slick as possible is our biggest threat and opportunity at the moment. And I think those that move with it will flourish, and those that don't will ultimately be left behind. Pretty much what I was just talking about. The role of technology has evolved from automating the business to actually being the business. And we're going to touch on what that really means in the next slide. Like we've said, technology needs to become the foundation of which to build your business upon, not back to front, which is often the case. I think the role of IT has changed. I don't even like the phrase IT. I think it's technology, and it's far beyond just looking after laptops and printers. And now it's becoming, you know, key cornerstones of what your business does. Whether you're a tech business or not, you are a technology company, or will have to be in the very near future. So what are we actually talking about? Some of you may have heard of this acronym before. RPA stands for Robotic Process Automation. When many businesses think of automation, and I'm sure you've all visited webinars, etc. before, it seems to be very fashionable at the moment to use RPA. And what RPA actually does is essentially imitate a human. So it looks at the screen, it's waiting for that number to appear in that box, and when that happens, it's going to go and press some buttons just like a person would to get work done. And that's great in the right application or the right use case. So as it says here, it automates simple, repetitive, rule-based tasks. It relies on something called screen scraping, which is that looking at the screen piece I just talked about. Reduces errors because it's programmatic, so you know it will do whatever you tell it to do. It's fast because it can type faster than the person ever could. However, it's inflexible and fragile, and it's inflexible and fragile because if anything in that workflow changes, if a box moves ever so slightly, or if a value is not quite correct or whatever, RPA will stop functioning. It won't work. So we've got a customer we use RPA with, for instance, and they had an ordering portal, which is ultimately a website, and the customer whose website it is that they use to ultimately order things on was acquired by another company. And it's fair to say there was a bit of panic internally as to, well, what's the new website going to look like? Have they changed things fundamentally? And actually, it turns out they just changed the logo and everything was fine. But it could have meant a complete rewrite of that process in RPA. So I'm not saying don't do it, but as it says on the screen there, it shouldn't be the focus of your long-term strategy. It's a means to an end at the moment, but you shouldn't be looking to use this as part of your digital transformation or your long-term automation. So let's move on. What should we be doing? And it's got many marketing terms that are applied to it, but the two most prevalent ones are intelligent automation or hyper-automation. And depending on who you speak to, some people will tell you hyper-automation is RPA plus AI. I actually disagree with that. RPA with AI could be used, absolutely, but hyper-automation or intelligent automation for me harks back to what we talked about before of using platforms as a foundation, writing workflow between them to achieve whatever. So I'm going to try and explain what the difference is here. And again, I'm happy to talk about this in the Q&A afterwards, but stick with me if you're not technical and this doesn't make sense. So it automates unstructured tasks, okay? So before in the RPA world, we're looking for a thing to happen. When it happens, we see it, the process kicks off, we do X, Y, and Z. In this world, it's actually slightly different. We're not looking at the screen anymore. In fact, we're not even interested what the user interface looks like. We're talking at platform level. So we're talking things like APIs. So the integration for intelligent automation is at a really low level within these platforms. So, you know, if the screen is turned off, we don't care anymore because we're looking at changes at a very base level. So what that means is if the user interface was to change or whatever, we don't actually care because we're talking from database to database, or we're looking for changes within the system itself. So already it's more versatile, it's more, it can still be used if something is to change, and it can deliver a human-like interaction, but without literally pressing the buttons that a user would press on the machine during their day-to-day work. We've kind of touched on this already, that it's kind of the center of your digital world. And what we mean by that is, if you've got API connections into each of these platforms that, that is your business, you can ultimately write whatever workflow you need to write between them. And you can have thousands and thousands of different use cases to achieve whatever it is you need to achieve. It's also faster and more efficient because it is systems based. It's also much quicker to deliver in terms of projects. So when we talk about an intelligent automation project for a specific use case, we could be talking something that's delivered from initial discussion to actually being live in less than sort of 2 weeks. In the RPA world, that's going to take far longer. And that's, again, what we've touched on here. It's flexible and robust. So our hyper-automated future. Why is it better than RPA? We've kind of touched on most of this already. So it allows us to increase our agility. We can do stuff faster, quicker. We can improve the customer experience at the same time. How often do you deploy a new IT system and or do you call a customer service center and, oh, I'm really sorry, the computers are a bit slow today. Oh, I'm really sorry, we've got this new system, etc., etc. Wouldn't it be nice to say, actually, we've got this new system and it's brilliant. It means we can do stuff faster and deliver whatever it is to our customers better. It reduces system downtime. We've ultimately got a handle on what's going on at the base level of all of these SaaS platforms. So if there's an issue, we spot it very quickly and ops teams, etc., can react quicker. We can also write automation so that the system looks after itself. So for instance, if this platform is down, automation knows it's got to call out these people or raise this major incident or whatever that process is internally. Again, it reduces the risk of human error because it's all programmatic. We'll talk about people in a minute. We'll come back to that one in a second. You can gain better data insights because you haven't got to rely on, receiving reports from across line of business. You can actually deploy stuff above all of these platforms that hooks down into the relevant systems to provide you sort of a view of the world, a CIO's view, as I like to call it, of everything, all these technology stacks within my business I can view from one place, which is, for anybody who's worked in senior IT management, is nirvana. If I can see my entire landscape from that single view, that to me is probably the most important thing. It improves security because we're using API keys, we're rotating keys, we can apply security to those as well. So we're not having to rely on our system being sat there, logged in, and screen scraping happening like we do in the RPA world. And ultimately, we can spend more time on innovation. If we've managed to deploy our hyper-automation in a clever way, we can buy ourselves time to focus on things that really matter. I will put this up now. The elephant in the room. People think automation is the answer to solving your people cost issues. And what that really means is I'm going to buy some automation. I can get rid of X people, and that's how I'm going to save money in this new era of having to tighten our belts across the board. We would challenge that at Synaptek. And although that is a valid use of automation, we would argue that you should deploy automation to focus on things that machines are good at, to free people up, to focus on the things that they're good at. So all of those, innovations that you've never got time to do, for all those things that we could make better, but we haven't got the resources to do it. Wouldn't it be nice to buy ourselves the time to implement all those things we never quite got around to doing? And that's what we tell customers all the time when they ask us, well, Carl, automation's great, but we don't know what it is we want to go after. We would say, pick the processes that are time consuming, that ultimately could easily just be automated, because your staff will be happier and you've bought them time to focus on ultimately the reasons you employed those staff in the first place, because of who they are and how they think, etc. Let's talk about change. All of what we've just described relies on really good change management. And this here is our kind of recipe for how we approach these kind of tasks within companies. So start with a proof of value. Start with something. Pick a use case that you want to go after. If it was me, I'd pick the most difficult because everything after that is easy. So get that proof of value. Actually do a proof of value. Put it in, test it, make sure it works. A really great piece of advice that I've stolen from somebody recently is measure what you care about. Pick what's important to you. What are those goals of applying automation to your company, and measure them. And then at the end of the proof of value, you can actually see if it was worth it. I'm biased. I think it will be worth it, but let the results speak for itself. Share that success throughout the company. There will be people who are naturally terrified of automation. We've experienced it ourselves where the IT team think we're just there to replace them, and that's not the case. What we have seen multiple times and what we've really enjoyed is people see the value of the automation, and then they start coming back to the business with I've got this idea, can we try this? We should go after that. And suddenly the whole business is thinking about efficiency, which is absolutely amazing. And when people realize how quickly this stuff can be delivered once you've got the methodology right, you know, you're buying yourselves time to focus on your business, which is what all of us want to be doing, not copying and pasting stuff between spreadsheet A and spreadsheet B. And last but not least, repeat it. Do it again. Keep doing this over and over again. So yeah, I've been really fluffy on the actual use cases that we could apply automation to, but the short answer is pretty much anything that involves technology, people, and processes can be automated. And when I say automated, I don't just mean thing A happens, thing B then gets kicked off. That could be really complex. That could be a 1,000 step process. It could be a process that says, hey, Mr. Manager or Mrs. Manager, I need a decision on this. And then, you know, the answer of those questions then determines what happens next, or what part of the process, or what approvals are required. I'm not going to read these out to you because we'll be here for hours, but, you know, this stuff's pretty broad. There's fair stuff in there. And actually, if we think about our current customer base, we've touched most of these use cases already. So last but not least, customer experience is everything. I think we know this already, but I'm just going to sort of ram it home. The bar for exceptional customer service is always moving up. And I know I'm one of these people. Customers are very fickle at the moment and will always go to the platform or business that treats them best. So you can't afford to ignore customer experience. And what was great yesterday isn't necessarily what's great today, because everybody's always catching up. Everyone's always trying to outdo their competitors. So to me, using automation to deliver an outstanding customer experience is absolutely something I would be looking at if I was a business owner. So you've got to do everything you can to remain relevant to your customers and to your users. So we've touched on this already. The impact of everything we do in business is based on technology. It has to be, because if it's not, we can't compete with our competitors. So we can use this to apply better customer insights. You know, wouldn't it be brilliant that if our feedback loop from things like customer surveys went directly to the right team, so they could implement those changes, they could fix that problem, whatever it is, far quicker than, you know, getting a stock response saying, thank you for your complaint, we'll respond to you in you know, 40 days or whatever. Wouldn't it be great just to deliver that straight back? And last but not least, and we haven't really touched on this today, but when you start to hook up these platforms and workflows together, you can start to apply clever stuff in the middle. And what I mean by clever stuff is AI and ML, which is, everyone's absolutely talking about it at the moment, but, you know, specific applications. Wouldn't it be great that, you know, if we were using this for customer service, if we use something like sentiment analysis, which we can just consume off the shelf from somebody like Google or Amazon, to filter out those really upset customers or where there's a problem, you know, and deal with them quicker. And it all ties in, doesn't it? If we've got a really angry customer or a really massive issue, we don't want that sat at the bottom of an inbox for a day. We'd actually like to surface that quicker and get it fixed. Or better still, surface that and use automation to fix whatever it is that's wrong if we can. But as you can see, there's so many broad applications of this. And the whole point of today's presentation is to really give you just a flavour of that. I'm nearly done, bear with me. We have built an automation roadmap, which pretty much covers how we attack or how we go to look at automation at businesses. And we will be sending that out off the back of today. So please do have a look. And if you just want to have a chat, you know where we are, give us a shout type thing. We've stolen this Steve Jobs quote, which I really like. You have to start with customer experience and work backwards to the technology. And we wholeheartedly agree on that one. And that's it from me. Suzanne, how are we looking in the Q&A?
Great, thanks, Carl. Yeah, we've got a couple of questions. I'll just fire them out to you. So the first one, what about systems that aren't in the cloud?
Yeah, great question. The short answer is it doesn't have to be cloud-based systems. We are able to use multiple tools and products to reach into on-premise systems or even, you know, cloud-hosted, private cloud-hosted stuff. So yeah, the world is your oyster, really. And also, just to expand on that one, in fact, somebody's just asked the question, what if the platform doesn't have API access? You don't have to have API access. API access makes your life a lot easier, but there's an absolute tool bag of tools you could use to automate systems that don't have API access. For instance, a use case we had very recently was we needed to get some data from a credit reference agency. They didn't have an API, so we developed something in AWS Lambda, which would take in that inbound email, open the attachment, read the CSV file into a database, and from that point forward, it's then in AWS, and that data is available for us to then use, you know, further down the road. So, you know, you can even use this kind of approach off the back of emails and text messages and anything else you can possibly think of.
Brilliant. This again from an anonymous attendee. Do you still need people to manage the automation, and how technical do they need to be?
That's a really great question, actually, and I'm going to give you a really fluffy answer to start with and say it depends. But let's delve into that a little bit more. So, no, you don't need people to manage the automation. If you've been through this process, you've deployed it and it works, you're kind of done at that point. It will work and it will fire every single time that trigger is hit. It depends on what approach your business wants to have. We've worked with companies recently where some of the time savings that they've had from people, they've then redeployed those people and we've actually retrained them so that they can then almost become like automation ambassadors within the company, so that they've then built a very small automation practice, and that's also the team that looks after the automations if, for instance, you know, AWS was to be down that afternoon or whatever. But likewise, sales pitch, that's something we could do as well. So if you wanted to get us in, we have an automation managed service where we are essentially an extension of your team, and we have guys and girls on the ground that come and do this and look after it and build it for you on a daily basis.
I think what you've talked to me about before, Carl, is that what automation can do is unearth some of the sort of insights and data findings that would otherwise be really time consuming for a human to do. So there will still be an element of the decision making lies with people best set to do that, but everything is there at the touch of a button to inform your decision and do things quicker. Great. We had one other question which I've actually taken offline, so I've just sent a contact email through, which was regarding equity partnerships in startups. So I've sent through our contact address, which is info@synaptek.co.uk. So if anyone wants to get in touch through that, then please do. And as Carl mentioned, we'll be sending out the video and also our automation starter pack, which I hope you'll all find really useful. Thanks so much, Carl. That was really great.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Oh, just one second. Sorry, we've just got a question in the chat just before we leave. What's the difference between this to self-service integration platforms such as Tray.io?
They are use case specific, whereas we're not actually talking about anything platform specific. We're talking about ultimately defining your IT strategy, picking that tooling and delivering whatever it is. So Tray.io, great service, does what it does, but that's all it does in its own little world here. So if you go back to my original drawing, it's just another one of those blobs on my diagram. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying you need to think bigger, longer term. It might work for you right now, but what's it going to look like 5 years out type stuff.
We've also got another comment from, I'm not sure I can read that, but we have a tool that maps all devices and apps rapidly, may be of interest. So we'll pick that up offline, if that's okay. So info@synaptek.co.uk if you'd like to get in touch. I think that's it. Just check no one's got any final questions before we close. No, that's great. Thanks again, Carl.